Welcome back, War Room fans. Okay, let's talk about force advantage and how I think we can improve it and make it better. And I also think force advantage is one of those things in the game that I think is what's kind of really messing with me. So as we can read here, those are the rules for force advantage. We all know them. Side with the fewest land types, blacks and whites miss. Okay. So here's what I think we should do with force advantage. At least give it a try. I know Bryce and I are going to try this. Okay. Back in the day when the game was first in its infancy, they didn't have it this way. Force advantage worked more like port advantage in its original inception. They did this primarily because of those monostacks, and they thought this was a good way to, without revamping the whole combat system, that this would be enough to kind of mitigate some of the monostack things. But I think one of the problems was when they did that is I think it kind of messed up combat in general, just over the entire combat board and just how the game plays out. Now, we're going to kind of play with this. This is more of like a philosophical thing here. I think it should say, for the side with the fewer land types, blacks and whites misses. I don't think it should say that. It should say for the side with the most land types, blacks and whites hit. Now, well, what does that mean? Well, let's flip this force advantage thing kind of upside down. Because how the game works right now is that if we come in a normal battle, okay, once again, let's come back up here to our, let's look at the Egyptian attack, okay? So here come the Italians and Germans in here, and they're going to take on those guys in Egypt, okay? Well, how the combat system works right now, no one has force advantage because we each have 3 land types. So what that means is, going back to our definition up here, everybody gets blacks and whites. I think how force advantage should work is that if you actually have the most land types, you get your blacks and whites. And so what that would mean is this very specific combat down here on the opening round or the opening battle, blacks and whites won't count on either side. But if, let's say, something would happen that, I don't know, let's just say, after the first round or after the first big battle, we still have 3 here, but the Axis only have 2 colors, so these guys get force advantage. I think it should be like a benefit to have force advantage, because right now, I know it's coming down to the wording, but basically it shouldn't, the way it is right now, it shouldn't be called force advantage, it should be called force disadvantage. Whereas the person who doesn't have the most stacks, they just lose their blacks and whites. But that's a disadvantage. I think it should be the other way around. I think you should reward the person that has that. Now, there is a side effect when you make that change, though. If you eliminate blacks and whites in combats like this, well, the natural result is that greens are going to linger a lot longer when everybody is evenly stacked in terms of land units. So it's going to be a lot more difficult to kill off the armor and these artillery, okay? So I personally, though, don't think that's bad. The other side effect is it's going to create a lot more embattled territories. So you're going to have a lot more combats that are going to get not resolved on that opening round of combat, that it's going to linger a turn, maybe even 2 turns after that. And then that's where the game comes into, well, then who can start getting reinforcements in faster? And not just total number of units, but different colors of units. So like in this example, so the British here in the 47th, if they lost their artillery and their infantry and all they're left with armor, well then getting those reinforcements in South Africa and the Middle East back in here to replenish the armor and the infantry is an actual advantage for the British, because once the Axis start taking casualties, they probably won't have any infantry left. So unless they can start funneling troops across the Med, the Axis powers are going to slowly get ground down by the British, who even with just minimal reinforcements, if they keep bringing these artillery and infantry in, will maintain their force advantage over the Axis, and then they're going to slowly, just get withered into the ground. So I think that's a change for the better. Now, the other thing it's going to do, though, is by doing that, this is a relatively small combat, but once we get on the Eastern Front, where we have like an 8 stack and a 4 against a 8 stack and a 6, what it's going to start doing, though, is in the larger combats, it's going to start reducing the amount of casualties. Because remember how it works right now is in this very specific battle, both sides only miss on a red. That's their only miss. And like the first batch of 10, they're only going to basically be missing on a red. And when I say miss, I'm just saying, you look at the 10 dice, and if I don't roll a red, I know I'm hitting something. Now the whites are kind of a wild card, but it really promotes really bloody combats. If you take out the whites and the blacks, and the reds don't count, well, they always don't count, then basically you have a 25% miss chance on every die. So it really starts depleting, the amount of casualties and hits that you're going to start throwing out. So you take like a really big battle on the Eastern Front where everybody's going in with 30 combat dice. On a 30 combat versus 30 combat situation where both sides have like 2 8 stacks and like some 4 stacks in there, you're going to hit probably, under the current system, you'll hit anywhere from like 26 to 28 hits. Now, sure, at some point they might run out of yellows, so then that will start increasing the miss chance. But if you use the example of everybody has infinite units on 30 combat die under the current system, you're going to hit around 26, 28 times. If you eliminate the blacks and whites because no one has force advantage, you now drop the expected result of a 30 die roll against infinite troops to, you're going to probably average doing 22 to 24 hits. So you're going to reduce the amount of casualties, especially in the really big combats. But then if in the second battle on the next turn, if one side, let's say, lost all their infantry, but the other side still has, their full complement of 3, well then the force advantage is really going to start taking its toll on the other side in that second turn of combat. Because now when they get their blacks and whites, now they're back up to hitting, at a very higher percentage. But never discount the fact that the blacks are the ones that really knock out these armor. Yeah, I mean, occasionally you just get on a hot streak and you're rolling natural greens. But usually it's the blacks and whites that take out the big units like armor. Same thing over here in the naval combat. Those battleships go to the bottom of the ocean primarily because of blacks and whites. That's how they get sunk, okay? So if you make that change, you're reducing the casualties. You're going to promote a lot more in battle territories. And eventually, though, as battles start lingering, it's going to basically turn into this, all you have left are basically armor with maybe an artillery fighting each other, especially in naval battles. You're basically going to be left with just battleships, which is how it is right now anyway, and probably your carriers. Well, your carriers will have a better survival rate if you did it that way. So your really high-cost naval units are going to be, they're going to be around the board a lot longer. But you're also going to find that you're going to start getting contested naval zones where it's just like 2 battleships just, flailing at each other and everybody's whiffing. Well, that's fine. That just shows that these, because remember, we're playing a really top level game here. I mean, we're not getting specific like other games do. So that's fine to me that if we have, let's say, a British battleship, an Italian battleship, and M2 just sitting there for 3 turns, flailing around, trying to kill each other, because that goes back to the concept of reinforcements, who can get some reinforcements in there to help out some of these battleships, okay? It also promotes maybe the air power, actually moving air in, trying to help out these battleships when they're tangled up. So that's one thing that Bryce and I are going to do. We're gonna flip force advantage on its head and say force advantage is a positive, where if you have more land types, you get your blacks and whites, and the other guy doesn't. Instead of how it is right now, where everybody gets blacks and whites. But if you don't have equal stacks, then you're at force disadvantage. I think that's going to make a difference in how a lot of these combats get played out. But also, I like the idea. It does promote. You want to have 3 color types. You want to. Now, I understand this is just kind of playing around on the edges a little bit of wording in how it goes, but sometimes this is about feel. It's like, does that feel right? Does that feel better than how it is right now? Because we know, everybody who's been playing this game now knows this is a bloody game. The troops, especially, the bigger these stacks go, the more they just start, you start taking huge amounts of casualties. And that's fine, because that's the way the game was designed. But I do think flipping force advantage on its head will make combat, it'll kind of get rid of that weird feeling, I believe, on how some of these combats play out. And I definitely know one of the side effects of it is you're going to see a lot less of this mutual destruction that seems to happen. I'm going to say at least once or twice in a game. You'll have like two stacks of like 6 to 8 units crash into each other, and when it's all said and done, there won't be anything left, and that just is odd. So those are my ideas on force advantage and how I think we can make it better. So I'll be back.